What's something you can swear you saw but no one is believing you? I live in a rural community in Canada. My sister came to see me once and swore up and down that she saw a zebra grazing in the fields. I made fun of her for a couple of years about how the zebra roam the North Pole and how Santa has zebra instead of reindeer. She was really starting to doubt herself but stuck to her guns. Well, I was driving one day and lo and behold, a fucking zebra grazing in the field. Turns out a zoo sometimes lets them roam around there. When I told my sister, she felt vindicated. 6 years ago I went through 10 surgeries for a badly broken leg. During one of the surgeries early on, I have distinct memories of waking up and hearing, seeing and smelling several minutes of the surgery. I also remember a nurse looking me in the eye and then telling someone I was awake. I then passed back out, presumably due to more anesthesia. No one believes me that this happened. I'm now terribly afraid of surgery and hope I never have to enter another operating room. This happened to me. I woke up during a knee surgery and heard the surgeon arguing with the anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist said something like, "You, the surgeon, tell me you're going to be X amount of time longer and then you tell me you're finished." I also heard the surgeon say he's, me, fatter on the outside than he is on the inside. The surgeon said it wasn't possible that I woke up during surgery, but when I repeated back what was said, the look on his face told me he knew I was telling the truth. I woke up while having wisdom teeth removed. I remember opening my eyes, there were very bright lights, and the assistant was peering in my face and looked pretty pissed. I thought this will really hurt in a few seconds, and then they knocked me out again. When I woke up, I was strapped down pretty securely to the chair. They never said anything to me, just released me like it was normal, but I suspect that when I started waking up, I was trying to fight them or something. Might be why the assistant looked so pissed. I had warned them prior to the procedure that some sedatives don't work very well on me, and they kinda waved it off, but ever since, I've had a fear of being put under. I told the anesthesiologist at my last, unrelated, surgery about this and she didn't act like she didn't believe me. So if you do have to have surgery again, let them know, because mine at least made a note about it in my chart, and I stayed knocked out the whole time that time around. My aunt and uncle take in children from the neighborhood to temporarily foster. When I was about 10, they were caring for a girl who was 14, but her neurological condition reverted her to the cognitive ability of a small child, including losing the ability to be potty trained. I still remember how confused I was since I was younger than her. I've searched for the name of the condition, but I don't remember enough about it. This memory is over 15 years old now, and I'm sure it happened, but certain details could be wrong. It was tragic, but my aunt and uncle were the best people for the job, and gave her an amazing home till they found permanent foster parents. My sister is 9 years older than me and she would take me everywhere she went when I was little. So we went to a friend's house and on the floor of the living room was a teenage girl in a shirt and diaper and a baby hat type thing. She was extremely disabled. I played with her for a while, not understanding that she wasn't acting, she was literally disabled. I think I was like 6 at the time. You could always call for a wellness check on the house if you believe the girl was there against her will. I went back home with my dad when I was like 8 or 9. We went to a family friend's house and a grown man, in his 40s, came into the living room crawling and babbling like a baby in excitement at seeing my dad. I laughed, my dad smacked me and the mother told him not to smack me and explain. Can't remember what it's called, but basically he never mentally developed past 8 or 9 months old but physically continued to grow. Saw him a few times in my teens and early 20s and always brought him stuff like you would for a baby. Once his parents died, none of his siblings took him, so he went to an institution and never heard of him again. I'll ask my parents if I remember when I see them next weekend. I have never mentioned this before to anyone. Scene, Epcot in Orlando, on the brick walkway between a walk-through part with stores and such on either side and the part leading up to the land. Date, June 2008. I was with my pregnant wife. Huge storm rolls in, black clouds, about to pour, when there was this unearthly deadening sound and bright light exploded. I opened my eyes and I was standing 30 feet or more away back under the covered walkway, unharmed. My wife said I had been standing right beside her, then I wasn't. It was too far to have run in the brief second of the explosion, I assume a lightning strike. Swear this happened as well as I could tell it. When we were 10 years old, all of my cousins and siblings were playing hide and seek in the dark in the middle of a park. When someone gets found, you join the seeker to look for people, but you can't tell them where they are. I was the seeker and I had just found one of my cousins, so we were walking around and looking for the rest. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone that looked exactly like my brother run past us at inhuman speed. I turned to look at my cousin and he had admitted that he saw the same thing. We found my brother later in the round, but he was at the other side of the park. Nobody believes either of us, but both of us still remember it. When I was a kid, I ate some of my grandmother's heart medication and nearly died. Was rushed to the hospital to have my stomach pumped, and I have a memory of looking down at myself on the hospital bed with my mom and hospital staff around me. It still is one of the only things I've had happen that I cannot explain, and no one I've told this story to believes me at all. Even my super religious aunt said it was my imagination. Not something I saw, something I felt and heard. I was struggling to sleep one night, lying in bed feeling wired and irritable when I felt pressure lift from the bed on my partner's side. I assumed he'd got up to go to the bathroom. I was facing the opposite way so I didn't see him do this. A few minutes go by and I hear him come back into the room and feel him get back in bed. Nothing strange about that. Lying there still frustrated, the same thing happens again, a lift of pressure, some rustling sounds like a person trying to navigate a dark room, an absence of sound for a few moments, and then the sensation of weight on the bed again. Still not thinking much of it, because it wasn't an obvious cause for concern, I continue trying to fall asleep. Then it happens again. And again. And again. I wasn't too into the idea of asking him if he was okay, as we had a ridiculous argument that night and I was pretty pissed off with him, so I just ignored it. But then it sounded like he had got up and was simply pacing around the room clumsily. I could hear things on the shelves being touched and slightly moved and hands gently brushing against walls, and then I felt the bed suddenly dip in a concentrated spot of the mattress as though he had stood on it. This carries on for I don't know how long, rustling, pressure on the bed and so on until I snap. I sit bolt upright, turn around and say, "What the hell are you doing?" To see my partner waking up from a very deep sleep and looking confused. I told him what had happened and he said he'd been asleep next to me the whole time, which was pretty obvious to see him in his very sleepy state. Plus he would have had mere seconds to jump into bed without me noticing in the time it took me to sit up and turn around. I somehow fell asleep that night feeling confused and as though eyes were on me. The story of my uncle is stranger than the one above. He went missing for 27 years. He was a very, very sick man, mentally speaking, and he had escaped from the institution he'd been staying at. My mum searched for him high and low, tirelessly. She constantly asked the police for help, hired private investigators and contacted TV shows, all to no avail. For 26 whole years she just wouldn't and couldn't let it go, until she did. She decided enough was enough, it was making her sick, she accepted he was clearly dead, and around a year after making that decision she was contacted by a farmer who had spotted a makeshift tent on the outermost part of his massive land, and it was my uncle. This farmer helped my uncle, he fed him, clothed him, called him an ambulance when he passed out one time, and slowly got information out of him about who he was and where he came from. I will never in my life forget my mum's ashen face as she told me a stranger had called saying her brother was alive and living in his field. My brothers went to get him and bring him home right away, but he had been living off-grid for so long he was no longer classed as a British citizen and was treated as though he didn't even exist. They managed to get him a flat somehow, but getting a doctor was near on impossible, and he was as sick mentally as he ever was. He claimed he saw the devil frequently and would occasionally take on the persona of his dead father, which scared my mum terribly as he was a very abusive man. Anyway, my uncle was spoiled rotten by my whole family for 18 months until one night he died of a burst aortic aneurysm that nobody knew he had. The same thing my other uncle died from exactly a year later, and the same thing my mum had surgery for just 2 weeks ago and is recovering from. When my uncle's flat was cleaned out, there were many notebooks filled with his conversations and experiences with the devil. It was very distressing for my poor mum, and one of my brothers threw it away. I saw my uncle fall from the roof as he was escaping a house fire. He was able to get inside the car and take off, but not before the house toppled over on top of the house. After a few minutes he appeared out of the smoke, limping away. I distinctly remember running back to my house, right next door, to tell my mom about what had just happened. We go outside and nothing. No fire, no smashed car, no house falling over. I don't know WTF 5-year-old me was smoking, but I had the hardest time processing what had just happened or not happened. My mom was so angry with me for coming up with such an awful lie about her little brother. Till this day, 27 years old now, I can't explain what, why, or how I saw what I saw, but I very much remember terrifying feeling I felt during and afterwards. My betta fish disappeared out of a covered tank, and then reappeared in front of my eyes. If you can imagine, this tank is clear plastic on all sides, including the bottom. There's nowhere to hide when it's empty. The only thing not transparent is the metal lid. Betta fish are known to hide, so I didn't worry about not seeing him for a couple days, but on day 3 I got worried. So I took the heater and filter out. Checked the inside of the filter. Took the plants out. Took the hides out. No fish. Nothing in the tank but water and glass rocks now, so I started scooping the rocks out, thinking he may have gotten trapped under there and died. Pretty soon I'm staring at a tank with nothing but water in it. No fish. I figure there's no way he's still alive, so I start scooping the water out. It's about 3/4 full when suddenly my fish does one of those fishy slow turns in the dead center of the tank. There he was. It wasn't, like, I turned away and then back and my fish was there. No, I was staring at the tank, and I quite literally saw him swim back into existence. 1 second he wasn't there, the next he was. I moved him to a smaller bowl for a few days to keep an eye on him. Covered the top with perforated plastic wrap to ensure no jumping. He disappeared from the bowl a couple days later and never came back. Have owned several betta fish, and I can honestly say no other fish has ever dimension hopped out of a tank since. Once when I was about 17 I heard a noise, and then I was flat on my belly on the ground. My legs had dropped me automatically, there wasn't any thought between hear noise, hit the dirt, and I had an instant of the fuck am I doing before a swarm of some kind of insect flew over and all around me in a great rush. I could feel the breeze of them on my skin. I could smell them, kind of dusty, kind of sweet. It was so fucking cool. I know that if it was a swarm of bees, I would have been fine, they were just on their way to the next place, but I guess my monkey back brain sure didn't know. Was playing with my cousin and a friend of ours outside. We were riding our bikes and had a bunch of fun, but couldn't explore that far from where I live, since we were like 7 or 8 years old. As we were cheerfully cycling down a long road behind a parking garage near my apartment, I started to slow down as I was getting tired of it. Both of them were continuing to cycle down the road as they haven't noticed me being left behind yet. You have to understand that the location of the road was right in between the parking garage, with 2 floors, and a fence which has only rails on the other side and was usually deserted. So once I stopped cycling, I could only turn tail or follow the road ahead. After reaching my limit, I simply stopped my bike midway after a while and tried to catch some breath. While doing so, something caught my eye on the back stairs of the parking garage. I tried to get closer to check out what it was out of curiosity. But boy, was that a mistake. I spotted a man who seemed kneel down behind a wall of the back stairs. Didn't seem suspicious at first, however after a closer look I saw what seemed like knife covered in blood. My body froze and all I could feel was fear that went through my body, which felt like it lasted for minutes. The man just started to catch on with me standing on road and began to slowly stand up and face my direction. I was somehow able to get my brain back to process and bolted down the street with any power I had left in me. After passing both my cousin and friend, as well as leaving a big distance to where I spotted him, I started to break down in tears and explaining what happened. No one would believe me, since they went back to check and found nothing strange. Got so traumatized from it, that I avoided the road until my mid-teens. TLDR, saw a man with a knife covered in blood behind a parking garage while cycling as kid, and no one would believe. When I was a kid, between the ages of 4 and 8, I would see a guy in my house. He would stand in the same spot in the same room looking at me, and my family couldn't see him. I'd cry and scream and would refuse to go near him, but nobody else ever saw him. I'm someone who believes in logic and the laws of the universe, so this really throws me off. I struggle to believe it myself, but I vividly remember this person, this ghost if you wish. Even now, I remember his face. I explained this to someone the other day and I felt so silly, I sounded like I was making it up. A fucking giant tornado in Iceland. My memory is something like this. I'm with my dad on some small highway. There were not many cars on the road and the weather was cloudy as usual. I was looking on the road for some time till I looked to my right and there was just a tornado there, far enough to not be dangerous to us, but I could see it very well ripping out fences. Then I just talked about it with my dad, that went a little faster just to be sure. I was somewhere around 11 or 12. When I asked my dad about it not long ago, he said that he didn't remember anything but seemed a little intrigued. I really don't know what it was, but it was probably just a dream that I dreamt in the car. When I was a kid, I remember seeing a lady's face in a doorway grinning at me, with what I assumed to be something brown covering her entire face and teeth. I would see her several times until we moved away when I was 5. Obviously my family didn't see her, but my mom got worried when I told her that I saw the lady from the kiosk, which is what I called the lady after I dreamt of her falling down a flight of stairs in a small store not far from our house. And I shit you not, my mom told me a few months ago that in the same store I was dreaming of, a woman had fallen down a flight of stairs and had her face torn on the way down, apparently being covered in dried blood when she was found, hence my description of her. Imagine the look on my face when I heard that LMAO. Also, apparently I kept talking to my mom about a man in the wall back then. I don't remember seeing a man in the wall, but I do remember talking about him. Edit, realized that the title says but no one believes you, shit. My mom believes me because she's had experiences like this with both my older brother and younger sister. Oh well.